Alright, this is the first part of the CBA Practice Version A. This is Unit 3. We're taking this test on Thursday, which is March 16th, I believe. Alright, so we're going to go through the first 6 problems in this video. Number 1 is doing a jailbreak type problem. You're trying to simplify a square root. Okay, so it helps if you break it down like this. Okay, because if you take out that -1, you can kind of separate and deal with it a little bit later. Remember, if you have negative in the square root, you automatically have to put an I in the problem. Right? 9, some of you might already know it is a perfect square, but if not, you can jailbreak it. Either way, you're going to get 3. Put them together, you get 3i. Okay, so that one's a pretty simple one. Basically, square root of 9 is 3. Square root of -1 is I. Put them together, you get your answer. Number 2, you've got squared here. That does not mean distribute. Don't do that. You cannot distribute an exponent. What squared means is multiplying times itself, which means I need to do 2 minus 4i times 2 minus 4i. That's what that whole group has to look like when you expand it. Again, feel free to pause. This is a video for a reason, so you can pause, rewind, go back, whatever you need to do. You can either do box method or use the claw method, or rainbow, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to show it this way. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times -4i is -8i. -4i times 2 is also -8i. And -4i times -4i is positive 16i squared. Now, you need to remember that I squared is really going to change to -1. I is equal to square root of -1. I squared is equal to just the number -1. So it's actually going to change to 16 times -1, which is really -16. So let's simplify this a little bit. I've got 4. If I put my like terms in the middle together, I get -16i. And at the end, we just said 16i squared is really -16. That simplifies it quite a bit. And then we have one last thing to do. Put our numbers that we've now gotten back together. So that's -12 minus 16i. There's your final answer. Okay. Number 3, you got to pick out the equation that matches your situation. You have hardcover books that cost $8, paperback books costing $4, and you have $40 to spend. Well, when you get to a register at a store, what do they do with all the things that you bought? Well, they add them up. So that means I know I'm going to have addition, and it's going to have to equal $40. It also tells me that H is hardcover, P is paperback. I need to actually pay attention to which one goes with which. Alright, so hardcover books cost $8. Well, if I buy 5 hardcover books, that's going to be 5 times 8, which is 40. If I buy 3 hardcover books, it's going to be 3 times 8, 24. So whatever I do, it's 8, the amount of money per book, times the number of hardcover books I bought. Same thing with paperback. It's $4 per paperback. P is for paperback because I don't know how many there are. So that's actually the formula, and on this one, this happened to be a typo because none of these are actually the correct formula. So if you tried to circle one of those, you were not paying attention to the signs or the variables because there are none that are true. Part 2 is going to use that formula, but you're going to actually plug in a number. It says you purchased 3 hardcover books. You're looking for how many paperback you're going to have left. So 3 is going to go in place of H because it's hardcover. Everything else stays the same, and now it's just an algebra problem. So start solving it. That's 24. Move the 24 to both sides. Didn't have enough space, I'm going to have to write it over here. So that's 16. Divide by 4, divide by 4. And I'm going through this part kind of quick because this is more algebra review. This is paperbacks. Okay, so no matter what, you should get 4. Feel free to do the algebra on your own because it's not too difficult. All right, number 4, same kind of idea, but you are making the equation. So adults are $8 per ticket, youth are $4 per ticket, and they want to sell $24,000 total. So I know it's got to add up to $24,000. And let's check our rubric before I start jumping in here. They don't actually tell us what the variables are, and that's because in part 1, you have to define what the variables are. So I'm going to use X to represent adult tickets, and you have to actually write this out. This is a necessity. If you don't write it out, you won't get credit. And Y is for youth tickets. You could have used other letters. You could use A, B, A, Y, Q, whatever. Doesn't matter. As long as you label it. Okay? Each adult ticket is $8, so I need to do 8 times my adult tickets, which is X. And they're going to be added to the youth tickets. $4 per youth ticket means it's 4 times Y. Okay, there's my equation. All it does is say to write the equation. Check my rubric. 1 point for correctly defining, which I did. 1 point for correctly using the variables and appropriate coefficients to write the equation. I did that too. So we're done. All right, moving on to number 5. First of all, you got to remember what the correct formula for a triangle is. Okay, well, triangles are really just half of a rectangle. Rectangles are base times height or length times width. So half of that is this formula. This is your area formula for a triangle. Part 2 is just asking you to fill in the blanks. So base is going to be X plus 2. I know with this one it looks kind of funky because it didn't format super well. But that's supposed to be the base, so X plus 2. The height is 2X plus 6, still divided by 2, and it's got to equal area. Well, the area, it tells me if I actually read my directions, is right here, 42 inches. Again, all I did was fill in base times height, still divided by 2, still has to equal area. All right, that's all they want for part 2. Part 3 is where you're actually filling in and actually doing the work. Now, the first thing you're going to have to do is simplify that top part. You've got X plus 2 times 2X plus 6. So let's simplify that a little bit. I'm going to ignore the dividing by 2 and the 42 for a second. So let's simplify. You got to distribute. Lots of distributing in this test. X times 2X is 2X squared. X times 6 is 6X. And you could do box method for this if you wanted. It's all right. It's up to you. 2 times 2X is 4X. And 2 times 6 is 12. I think it's the same color twice, but whatever. These two things are like terms, so they're actually going to become 10x. So we have 2x squared plus 10x plus 12. Still is all divided by 2. Still is equal to 42. Again, pause if you need to. I'm going through it quickly because it's a video for you to review with. You can go back and rewind if you need. All right, now we're dividing by 2, so that means I need to divide everything by 2. Okay, because I want to get rid of that 2 at the bottom. So the 2, let's check and make sure. 2 can be divided by 2, all right. 10 can be divided by 2, and so can 12, so we're okay. You don't need to divide 42 by 2 because it's not on that side. So this is going to become 1x squared, which is just x squared, plus 5x plus 6 equals 42. Still not quite done yet. Gotta get this to equal 0 so that I can start factoring it. Anytime you see this x squared, that should be a big red flashing light in your brain that you need to get it to equal 0 because it's a quadratic. So let's move 42 over to this side. So now I have x squared plus 5x minus 36 equals 0. Now I can start factoring it. Factoring should hopefully be a super easy review at this point. Hopefully you remember how to factor. Remember, that's where you take the t-chart of 36. I'm going to go up just because I don't have a ton of room. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12. You can divide these on your calculator if you don't know the numbers. 6 and 6. Okay, the only two numbers that multiply to 36 but also subtract to 5 are 4 and 9. Alright, now you got to figure out the signs that go with them. If you're trying to get a positive 5 and you're trying to multiply to get negative 36, you need different signs. So one positive, one negative, and I need the 9 to be positive so that I end up with positive 5 at the end. Now my answers, when I set x minus 4 equal to 0, I get that x equals positive 4. When I set x plus 9 equal to 0, I get that x actually equals negative 9. Now here's the thing, I've got two answers to my problem, but they really aren't both the right answer. So I need to go back to my triangle and check and make sure that they both work. Well, if I plug in x equals 4, 4 plus 2 gets me 6 here. If I plug in 4 here, 2 times 4 is 8, plus 6 is 14. All right, well, we're good so far. And if I actually do the math and do 14 times 6 divided by 2, I would get 42. So 4 is a legitimate answer. Okay, now what if I plug in negative 9? Negative 9 plus 2 gets me negative 7. Do we use negatives for side lengths? No, we don't. So automatically negative 9 does not work as an option. Got to cross that one out. And yes, you do have to go and pick which one is right on your test, otherwise you won't get full credit. All right, last one for this chunk of the test. All right, so ignore this writing real quick. I had to restart some of my stuff, my recording. All right, so let's take a look at the equation. Make sure you read through the whole thing. I actually went through and underlined everything that's important. All right, so make sure you've underlined it on yours. In fact, they already give you the equation you have to use. First thing we need to do is actually label our graph. And if you look in the directions, it tells you the X is the jars of tomatoes. And that Y is jars of cucumbers. So that already tells you what your X and Y axis are supposed to be. Well, now you got to figure out where the heck it crosses on those two axes. That's where your equation comes in. You've got 3x plus 4y equals 60. And I really am looking for my x and y intercepts, which means I need to plug in 0 for x, solve it, and plug in 0 for y. So 3 times 0 is going to be one equation. 4 times 0 is going to be the other equation because I'm trying to plug in and get my intercepts. When x is 0 on the left-hand side, that cancels out. My y-intercept is actually at 15. That's at the point 0, 15. That's your y-intercept right here on your graph. When I solve for x on this side, I get my x-intercept is at 20, which means it's really 20, 0. So put a dot there. Well, you've got 2 points, so connect them. That's your graph. So standard form actually sets it up very nicely for you. Part 2 says interpret the meaning of the y-intercept. Well, it's at 0, 15 on the axis that's talking about jars of tomatoes. That means the most jars of tomatoes she can make is 15. That's what that y-intercept means. There's no other spot where she's making more tomatoes than at that point. And I'm running out of time, so on this last I'm just going to show you how you set it up. 8 cans of tomatoes goes in the X spot. You still have to keep Y there, and the rest of your equation stays the same. Solve for y, you should get 9.